A look at the last 5 presidents who ran for re-election and the lessons we learned from them that are appropriate for Obama's situation today.
3 of them won, 2 of them lost.
I'm Frank Newport, Gallup editor-in-chief.
And I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today.
And this is Election Matters. Well, Susan, this is a good time to see what we learned from history. There have actually been 10 presidents who've run for office for re-election since World War II, starting with Harry Truman. But things have changed, but I think the last 5, starting with Jimmy Carter in 1980 who ran, are the ones that we can really look at kind of in the modern era, and we can see what we learned from their situations that are appropriate or applicable to Barack Obama's today. And as you said, 3 won, right?
3 of them won, 2 of them lost, which tells us that Americans are willing to turn out a president who they don't think is doing a good enough job and not give him a second term.
Well, let's start with the one who lost, and that was 1980, and that was Jimmy Carter. Mm-hmm. And the first thing we noticed is his approval rating was pretty miserable, right? I think in May it was 43%.
Yeah, 43%. That's below the rate that President Obama has now. He's at 47 or 48%. And he was struggling, but you know, that race remained pretty even until late in the campaign. It wasn't clear until we got really to the debate that Jimmy Carter was going to lose.
And also there was some stuff with the Iranian hostages, mm-hmm. right, that came out and may have helped Ronald Reagan. I do remember at the last minute, Reagan really surged. He actually won by a significant margin in the popular vote.
He did. He once, mm-hmm. you know, I think with presidents we see a 2-part process in Americans' minds. First, it's a referendum on the president. Is he doing a good enough job? And Americans decided Jimmy Carter was not doing a good enough job. But then they look at the alternative and they say, is this someone I can trust? And it took a while for President Reagan to build the trust so that Americans and those independent voters felt comfortable voting for him.
He was seen as a conservative.
Very conservative
mm-hmm.
For the era. And someone who had said some wacky things, trees cause pollution, that kind of stuff. But in the end, he forged a connection with voters and got elected that time, and of course, he got reelected in a landslide.
Which we'll come to in just. But one last point on the 1980 election: Obama's in a better position by objective indicators now than Carter was at about this time in 1980.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
but that is a low bar.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, 1984, Reagan, what was his approval rating?
His approval rating was over 50%. It was 55% at this point. And we knew that he was going to win that election from
mm-hmm.
the start. Barring something unexpected, that was a case of an incumbent sailing to a second term.
It was Walter Mondale, the Democrat. He did a campaign based on Morning in America, mm-hmm. which was basically saying, look how well off we are, right? Aren't we doing well? And actually our objective indicators at Gallup showed Americans were improving. The perception of the economy was getting better. They like Reagan. And as you say, he sailed right to re-election. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the debate where he said, the interviewer said, what about age, Mr. Reagan? Is that a factor?
And this is after he had had a stumble
mm-hmm.
in the previous debate where he'd seemed to kind of lose his way a little bit. And so in the next debate, when he was asked about that, he said, I'm not going to make an issue of my opponent's youth and inexperience. Everyone laughed. That issue was diffused.
Yeah, that was a brilliant moment that they still show in mm-hmm. debate history, you know. And he delivered it so beautifully.
Yes.
Of course, he's a trained actor,
yeah.
so he had learned it ahead of time and delivered it. All right, well, let's fast forward to the next election, which would have been 1992. George H.W. Bush was seeking re-election. His job approval rating at this point was pretty terrible, right? By this point, I mean in the late spring, summer of 1992.
Yes, although he had been very popular in the aftermath of the first Gulf War.
89%.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
But a feeling that he wasn't doing a job on the economy, that he didn't realize the lives that most Americans lived, and he was having a tough time. And of course, that was a complicated election because we had a third-party candidate involved in that as well, Ross Perot.
Yeah, and Bill Clinton. I think the polling at one point had showed actually of those 3 people, Perot was ahead, right? And then he dropped out and came back in and all that. But Bush, by this point, was not winning in the polls, and I don't believe ever came along and win thereafter. So again, today, Obama's doing quite a bit better than George H.W. Bush was at this point in 92, so that's comfort to the Obama campaign.
So he's doing better than both the presidents who lost.
Mm-hmm. So let's move to another one who won, which was Bill Clinton in 96.
And again, this was like 1984,
mm-hmm.
in that the president had a big lead, the economy was good, it was never really a contest.
Against Bob Dole. His approval rating was in the 50s as well,
mm-hmm.
right? Bill Clinton's.
Above 50%,
mm-hmm.
that breakthrough point that President Obama has had trouble getting across.
Yeah, again, he's not been there consistently in our Gallup polling yet. He occasionally broaches it, but then he falls back down again. He's in the high 40s, I would say. All right, fast forward. Who was the next one who ran for re-election?
The next one who ran for re-election was George W. Bush.
And that's kind of similar to where
Yeah,
Obama is,
yeah.
don't you think?
Some question. His job approval rating was just about where
47, 48.
where-
It went above 50 later in previously, but he had been down in the high 40s.
And so that was seen as a competitive election, although in the end he won by a couple percentage points. It wasn't as close as the election he'd had 4 years earlier.
Yeah, but still, that ended up being, I guess that may be the closest to where Obama is, and that kind of shows that Obama could theoretically win with the kind of numbers he has at this point.
And of course, George W. Bush won after his campaign really went on the attack against John Kerry and succeeded in raising questions about him and his character. And that may be one reason we see so many negative ads now directed at Mitt Romney.
So Obama's campaign has learned from what happened back then. So what do we learn from all of this? He's doing better than the two who lost, it's fair to say, Bush Sr. and Carter. He's doing worse than the two who won easily, Reagan
Yes.
and Clinton, and kind of similar.
So I think we have to
George
conclude that we don't know how this election is going to
Hey,
turn
good
out.
conclusion. Yeah, everything we look at suggests it's going to be a close race.
Yeah.
Yeah, very fascinating review of history. I'm Frank Newport, Gallup editor-in-chief,
I'm Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today.
and this is Election Matters.